As you probably know, the drum set originated in the US, and it came from marching drumming and military marching drumming, where there was a snare drummer or a couple of snare drummers and then a couple of bass drum players that were playing the bass drum and a little cymbal on top. So by the middle towards the end of the 19th century, drummers were looking for ways to basically condense things and play both instruments, the snare drum and the bass drum, at the same time. Originally they used a method called double drumming, where they would place the bass drum next to the snare drum and they would try to play it simultaneously with the sticks. Later on they experimented with different foot pedals that would allow them to play the bass drum with their foot, as well as little devices called the low boy, where the two cymbals that used to stay on top of the bass drum would be played also with foot and with a foot pedal mechanism. So by 1909, Wilhelm Ludwig patented the bass drum pedal, and then it was the drum set as we know it was slowly starting to assemble. Next to the snare drum and the bass drum and the low boy, there would be a lot of wood blocks and cowbells and little cymbals and Chinese tom-toms, not tunable at the time, that will sort of embellish the rhythm. Originally, drumming was used mainly in military marching bands, but later it started to get into the dance music of the day. At the time, this was ragtime music, and ragtime music used a lot of that marching vocabulary, which is the rudiments. The American rudiments are a very essential part of the vocabulary of drum set playing, drumming in general, specifically drum set playing, and even more specifically jazz drumming, because from the very beginning of jazz drumming, the rudiments were utilized, and they were creating the whole texture of drumming behind the other instruments. That's why it's absolutely essential for anyone who wants to get into drumming, but especially into jazz drumming, to have a good knowledge of the American rudiments. So here's a little demonstration of marching drumming and the way it probably sounded like when they combined the snare drum and the bass drum plate with the pedal. Probably the closest relationship between military marching drumming and the new music that started to emerge in New Orleans, called ragtime, later jazz, which had a special new feel, the swing feel, and it had involved a lot of syncopation, can be seen in the New Orleans street parade rhythms, or what they call second line drumming. So notice how the rudiments are again there, played in a more swung kind of feel, and then notice how the bass drum is marking the pulse, the main pulse of the music, in a special way where there's an accent in every four end. So you'll notice that the bass drum goes boom, 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 pop, boom, 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 pop, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. This was called the tilt in New Orleans music, and it's very important because it really creates that playful, syncopated feel in the music that starts to go away from the strict marching kind of pulse. In ragtime drumming, as well as in any other style of jazz drumming we're going to explore further, it's very important to notice and be aware of which part of the instrument or which voice of the instrument keeps time or marks the main pulse. This will give you a very good knowledge of how to approach the drum set in general. So in ragtime drumming, this was the bass drum. The bass drum was marking the basic pulse of the music and what people were dancing to. So the bass drum would be playing either on 1 and 3 or on all 4 beats of the bar, such as Baby Dots and Zodie Singleton drummers of that era were playing it, even though the tuba or the double bass were playing on 1 and 3. On top, the snare drum would be not only marking the time, but also embellishing the time and syncopating along with the other instruments in the band through playing the rudiments in a swinging and syncopated fashion. That's where the name ragtime comes from. So with the help of just the snare drum, the bass drum, and the lowboy, which is the predecessor for the hi-hat, we have the entire drumming part for ragtime music. And to make a variation in the groove and a variation of the dynamics in the music, drummers used to play the same part that they would play on the snare on the wood blocks or cowbells that they had attached to their drum set. Here's a little demonstration of that. Here's another example of ragtime drumming, but this time from the Chicago style, which is a little bit faster and it has a little bit of a different feeling. So you can see how ragtime drumming started to progress slowly towards the swing drumming.